Welcome to part 1 of Trauma Recovery for the Mind and Body. We're going to spend this entire section talking about the nervous system. And the nervous system has two anatomical parts. We have the central nervous system, which is made up of your brain and your spinal cord. And we also have the peripheral nervous system, which is comprised of all of the nerve fibers that extend from that spinal cord all the way out to every other place on your body, from your spinal cord to the tips of the fingers, from the spinal cord down to the tips of the toes. Now, that's where our nervous system is located in the body, but it has bigger and more important jobs than just physically being there. The nervous system is one physiological system with two subparts. Physiology is a study of functions that human bodies are able to do. So, this autonomic nervous system controls all of the body's functions that take place below the level of consciousness. Those are all of the things that you're able to do without ever having to think about them. What are some of those things that go no matter what, even if we never stop to think about them? You're probably coming up with examples like heart beating, digestion, and breathing. Breathing is really important. So that autonomic nervous system is broken up into two subparts. One is designed for acute stress, which we'll talk about next, and the other one is designed for relaxation. So that part of the autonomic nervous system that is designed for stress is the sympathetic nervous system. So when we say acute stress, we mean stress that is short term. It has a definitive beginning and a definitive end point. It's our body's immediate response to any kind of threat, challenge, or scare. Here's a bonus question for you. What are some commonplace situations that might trigger a stress response? Think about them for a moment. You can even feel welcome to dip them in the chat as they pop into your head. You're probably coming up with things like job interviews, first dates, getting into a quarrel with a loved one, or avoiding an automobile accident. All of these things, even though they're really common for us, activate the sympathetic nervous system. That is a system that controls our fight or flight response and also our freeze that we'll get to talk about a little bit later. But our fight or flight responses are triggered when the sympathetic nervous system is kicked on. And the SNS, our sympathetic nervous system activation, was a necessary function of the autonomic nervous system from way back when we had to run to protect ourselves or fight in order to feed our families. Stress is totally normal, and the ability for the body to trigger and turn on that stress response is still healthy and it's still necessary. What actually happens to the body during periods of acute stress? Let's talk about some of our physiological body level responses that occur when this happens. We have 3 biological responses that occur in the body. The first one is that adrenaline, or if you're in Europe, you might hear it called epinephrine. Adrenaline, epinephrine is secreted from the adrenal glands. The job of adrenaline is to signal the heart to pump harder, increase blood pressure, open the airways in the lungs, narrow the blood vessels in the skin and the intestines. Why would that happen? How does the body benefit from a restriction of the blood vessels in the skin and in the intestines? Well, the answer is by taking that blood away from the skin and intestines, we are able to redirect it to where it's needed the most. we start to experience increased flow of blood to the major muscle groups that we need in order to escape. If I'm being chased by a lion, let's say, digestion's not important to me. What is important is to make sure that my thigh muscles, my butt muscles, and my arms have enough blood to pump hard so I can run away. Moreover, another interesting thing that happens as adrenaline fills the body is that endorphins are released. The pituitary gland releases endorphins that inhibit a pain response. So if you think about it, I'll give a personal example. I was setting up for a barbecue and I sprained my ankle. I was so excited about that barbecue and so nervous about my guests' experience that I didn't feel the pain of that ankle sprain until hours later when everyone had left. And that's when it blew up like a little elephant ankle. So these are some of the things that happen as we start to get triggered into that fight or flight state. The second biological response is cortisol, which is a steroid in the body, is also released from the adrenal glands. Cortisol is involved with the regulation of proper blood sugar metabolism, blood glucose metabolism, and how it's used. It increases blood pressure. It counteracts insulin, which means that it stops glucose or sugar from being stored and actually encourages glucose to be released. So sugar is actually dumped into the blood. Think about how that would be helpful to your body. Why would I need sugar in my blood as opposed to being stored in my muscles? Beyond that, we know that cortisol suppresses immune function, prevents inflammatory responses, it actually shuts down reproduction, acts as a diuretic. So diuretics are the drugs that you can take to make you pee more. Yeah, sometimes that happens when we're scared. And this cortisol also decreases bone activity. Wow, think about how impactful some of those areas are to people's well-being if I am chronically stressed and now I'm not able to conceive, or my immune system is suppressed, or if my bones aren't regenerating the way that they're meant to. So, moving on to our third biological response, we have adrenaline, we have cortisol, and third, our body receives a burst of energy and strength, which is great, but all of my ancillary functions, things that are secondarily important to my survival, are halted in these areas.